Okay, good morning everybody. It's 10:30 and welcome to our event. Today we're going to talk about how cyber criminals are leveraging email, social media, and people's good nature to steal millions of dollars and victimize innocent users. In the process, we're going to offer some tips and tricks that will help you to keep you and your staff protected from the growing landscape of cyber threats. Now, we'll have time for questions at the end, but if there's something you'd like to know earlier, something you'd like to ask, please just type your question into the chat box. Brad and Kate are keeping an eye on that, and they'll let me know if there are any questions to be answered. So, with that said, let's get started. Today, we're going to talk about some important topics. First and foremost, especially given the subject matter, we're going to talk about what phishing is, what spear phishing is, the difference between them, and why they have become so common. We're going to talk about the techniques that hackers use to fool you into disclosing confidential information and why that's so dangerous, how to protect yourself online, and 5 very important defenses that we think every business should have in order to stay safe and protected. Our aim is to increase your awareness of cyber risks, and to make you less likely to fall for the increasingly sophisticated scams that you're going to encounter every day. You're also going to learn how to know when you're being scammed, what to do if you happen to click on the wrong thing and you fall for a scam, and of course, answers to your questions. And once you understand the risks, we'll talk about how you can stay safe. So hang in there, because I've got a very special bonus I'm going to make available at the end of the session. We have a family of technologies that are designed to keep you and your business safe, and we're going to make a pretty attractive offer, so please stay until the end. Now, just before we get rolling, I know there are a few of you here today that I haven't met yet. And so, for those people, let me briefly introduce myself. Back in 1977, I co-founded the KTS Systems Group, a software company which grew to 80 employees in 4 cities across North America. Just before I sold that business in 1995, I had actually created a network and infrastructure business unit because it seemed pretty clear to me at the time that the network, as the center of all things IT, was the way of the future. So after I sold KTS, it seemed pretty natural enough to create another company, Connectability, a business which is entirely built around helping our clients to leverage the benefits of a connected world. Now, let's go back to the subject matter of today's webinar. Why is this so important? Well, here's a quote from a really interesting book called Spam Nation. Spam remains the single biggest driver of big breaches today. If we look at some of the biggest data breaches in recent memory, JP Morgan, Target, and RSA Security come to mind. They all began with poisoned email. Now, I was actually at a cybersecurity conference a couple of weeks ago, and one of the speakers indicated that 74% of all successful attacks originate with email, what Brian Krebs calls a poisoned email. Well, if you've been on some of our other webinars, you might recognize this slide. A lot of small businesses think that they're not a target because they're not JP Morgan or Target Corporation, so nobody would want to hack us. Well, that's just plain wrong. First of all, these large companies have very sophisticated security systems in place. They're not actually that easy to hack, and therefore, if they're getting hacked, getting into your business is a cakewalk for a hacker, which is why you're actually a bigger target than these large institutions. The prize might not be as big, but you are far easier to rob than a large institution, which makes you a prime target. And since cyber criminals have automation tools just like the rest of us, just like every other business, they can make a large sum of money just by targeting a few hundred or thousand small businesses. You just don't hear about these attacks because they don't make national news. The news wants to focus on big stories like JP Morgan. And second, most small businesses don't even know they've been hacked, or they don't report it as the way they should because they're embarrassed or afraid of the legal and reputational consequences. And here's something else to chew over. Over the past few years, we've seen a few ransomware attacks at our customers. In one case, there was a customer who, despite us urging them many times to implement effective backup and security, didn't want to spend the money. Well, they lost 3 months of work that they had to reconstruct manually. On the other hand, 3 other customers who did make the appropriate investments in backup and security were able to delete the ransomware, restore their data to within seconds of the attack, and be back up and running within a couple of hours. Okay, so let's dive into the meat. What is phishing? For that's the first and most obvious question. Well, here's how Wikipedia defines it. Phishing is the fraudulent attempt to obtain sensitive information, such as usernames, passwords, and credit card details, often for malicious reasons, in fact, almost always for malicious reasons, by disguising as a trustworthy entity in an electronic communication. In other words, using email or text to get you to disclose confidential information. Now, look at this. The annual worldwide impact of phishing could be as high as $5 billion US. That's how much money people are stealing with these attacks. Well, here's one of the earliest email scams. It's often known as the Nigerian prince scam, but technically it's what's called an advance fee scam. The sender promises to share a huge windfall with you. All you have to do is advance a small amount of money to allow them to access the funds. Well, of course, we're all familiar with this one. You send them the $20,000 they're asking for, and not only does your $2 million not show up, but you never hear from them again and you can't find them. So, not too many people fall for this one anymore. But all that does is motivate the criminals to find more sophisticated scams. For example, here's a scam that's frequently used to target the elderly. A hacker manages to get the password for the Gmail account or the Hotmail account belonging to a family friend or a grandchild. They then send a truly alarming message which says that they're off traveling in Europe or whatever, they've been robbed, they've lost all their money, they can't get home, they need help. And unfortunately, people fall for this all the time. And if that's not frightening enough, here's one of the latest scams. It's called sextortion. The sender tells you that he has your password, and he even includes the password in the email. He also claims to have video of you watching porn, or maybe even a copy of an actual porn video that you're supposed to have made, and demands payment in Bitcoin to prevent him from sending that video to everyone on your contact list. Now, about half the time, the password that he puts in the email is actually correct. It's your password. And the other half is an older password, but it's still one that you've used before. And if you're wondering how they got that password, well, hang on. I'll answer that question in just a few minutes. Now, if you've never watched porn, never made a porn video, maybe you won't take this very seriously. But I have to tell you, I know some very serious people who would never even think about watching porn, who were nevertheless very frightened by this. Just the fact that somebody had their password was terrifying. Well, those attacks are what I might call generic attacks. Many of them could be sent to a group of recipients in the hope that at least one of them will respond. But a lot of attacks are designed to look like they are directed to you personally. Here's one I received recently, and if you look at it carefully, it looks pretty legitimate. It contains Microsoft logos, and it has one of my email addresses. But if you look more carefully, there are a number of signals that this is not quite right. And we'll have a deeper look at some examples of that in a few minutes. And that brings us to spear phishing. If phishing is a generic attack that's largely focused on attacking a large crowd in the hope that a few suckers will fall for the scam, spear phishing, by contrast, is a highly directed attack on specific individuals using highly personal information, usually collected from social media. Well, here's an email that was sent to the CFO of a company, apparently from the company's owner, asking him to transfer a large sum of money. The signature is correct, the language is correct, and if your CFO received a message like this, what would they do? Well, maybe if they were super careful, they would send an email asking for confirmation. But maybe not. And even if they did send that email, if this was what we call a man-in-the-middle attack, where the hacker has your password and access to your email, all they would do is reply with confirmation. Now, I mentioned a moment ago that these attacks are made more personal by the fact that the hacker has collected information from social media. Well, I'd like to show you a video that was created by Cisco quite recently, which gives you a much clearer picture of how that happens. I should also let you know that if you have a slower internet connection, there's a chance this video might be slightly glitchy. If that happens, please just post a note in the chat and we'll send you a link where you can watch it online. Okay, give me a moment to set this up. And here goes.
How did you decide to become a hacker?
Well, I'm not really sure what it means to become a hacker. That's like some guy in a hoodie who types really fast and stays up all night writing code and cracking passwords. It's not me. I just spy on people and see what makes them click. It's not a bad job.
Mark Hanning, CEO of Qualicart, set to report earnings after their blockbuster IPO.
So you consider this a job?
I put a lot of work into this. I'm not lazy. It takes research to figure out the key players, learn all about them, their families, their friends, what they care about. You have to understand the company's organization. I get a lot of my information from the sales department because they're always so quick and eager. They're hungry. People trust too easily. They don't look at the details. I do. Details matter. That's what I'm good at. It has to look completely believable. It has to look familiar. This is where research is important. It's not some generic piece of spam. It's an email from their boss with their company's signature. It's written in the voice of the boss. It's what he would say if he were writing this.
What about the malware itself? How does that work?
Somebody else out there already wrote all the code that does the actual attack. I'm just using it in the attachment. My skill is in my ability to get a bunch of people to click on that attachment. I always wonder what it's like when the whole thing unfolds on their end, when the panic sets in.
Please leave your message after the beep.
Hey, this is Rajiv in finance. Call me as soon as you get this. Something's up with my laptop. I can't
Katie, are you on your way into the office? Something's going on with our file servers.
It's Karen in HR. Our benefits dashboard seems really slow. We're getting calls from users on it. Can you call when you get this?
Joining conference now.
Apparently, there's a malware attack targeting our main...
It's ransomware. They're holding us hostage. We're locked out of everything. I can't even check my phone. What about the backup?
That will take days.
We need this fixed now. Just pay it. We don't have a choice. We're reporting earnings in 2 hours.
But how do we know that they'll...
pay it. Put every single person on getting us back up and running. That's the only priority now. Okay, it's done. I have the decrypt key. Mark, we have a big problem. The ransomware was just to distract us. They got inside. They got everything. Customer data, financials, everything.
Qualicards is reeling today from the news that hackers have released the personal information of nearly
The
2
Nasdaq
million
closed
customers.
lower today, led by Qualicard, which was down 14% on news that their recent data breach may be far worse than the company
Its stock
originally
fell to a
acknowledged.
new all-time low on news that CEO Mark Hanning is stepping down after what is turning out to be one of the worst breaches of personal information in recent history.
Do you feel bad about releasing the personal information? All the financials? All the money that was lost?
All I did was get the files. I'm not the one that decided to release them. I'm not the one that shorted the stock. Somebody else had their reasons for that. It's above my pay grade. I was paid to do a job, and I did it well. And that's what's expected of anyone, isn't it? Anyway, markets bounce back.
Okay, so now that I've scared the pants off you, the next question is obvious. How do you keep this from happening to you? Well, we think there are 3 pillars of that strategy. The first of those pillars is detection, being aware of the difference between legitimate communications and a scam. And the first key component of detection is education. Learning how to spot a fraud and what to do about it. If you know what to look for, there are many key indicators that will give away a fraudulent email, and here are a few of them. First and foremost, look for spelling and grammatical errors. Most of these phishing attacks originate overseas in countries where English is not the first language, and almost without exception, you will find errors. You will find singular where it should be plural, plural where it should be singular, missing articles or missing conjunctions, capitals where it should be lowercase, etc. All of those are triggers indicating that it is fraudulent. Look for emails that start with Dear email address rather than Dear John, Dear Julian. If you actually do business with the company, they'll know who you are and they'll have your name and they will say, Dear Sarah, Dear Julian. If they don't know you, if it's fraudulent, then you will see that form with a Dear email address. The same thing applies to Dear User, Dear Walmart Shopper. Any of those things are general indicators that it is a phishing attempt. Be wary be wary of anything that asks you to verify your password, address, or other credentials. Unless you are in the middle of setting up a new account, those requests are fraudulent. A legitimate business will not ask you to do that. Same thing applies to anything that tells you that your account is locked and asks you to log in again. Unless, again, you have tried logging in several times, you've forgotten your password, there might be some form of communication that would indicate that. But otherwise, if it appears out of the blue, it's fraudulent. What else? Well, anything that seems to come from a domain that has nothing to do with the sender. For example, you get an email from Microsoft asking you to change your Office password, but the email comes from someone at Gmail. That's fraudulent. If you get an email from your bank indicating that somebody's been trying to log in, but the email comes from Yahoo, it's fraudulent. Be wary of these things and be aware of these things. If you're not sure, hover your mouse pointer over the click here link that's inevitably on every one of these messages. And then look in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. That will show you the real address where you're going to go, and chances are 99.9%, as it says here, that it's either a hacked website or a fraudulent website. And then there are 3 general cautions. Number 1, if it sounds suspicious or unlikely, it almost certainly is. Number 2, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. And finally, when in doubt, delete the message. It's always better to be safe than sorry. Well, I promised you some examples, so let's dive into that. Here's one that appears to come from Walmart. And you can see it says Walmart Points, and it has the Walmart logo. But if you look at the email address, it says Walmart Points at bonuslatestspecialinfo.com. Well, that clearly is not Walmart. Secondly, it says Attention Walmart Shopper. If it was really going to you from Walmart, if you were really a customer with Walmart Points, it would say, Dear Jim, or Dear Sue. And finally, you can see that we've hovered the mouse over where it says Redeem Your Walmart Bonus here, and it says http://yourbonus.bonuslatestspecial.info. Again, that means this is not a Walmart website. So let's have a look at another one. This one comes from eBay, asking you to change your password because it says there have been multiple computers logged into your account. But if we look at it carefully, first of all, you'll see it comes from eBay account at security department. Well, that's not an email address. Second, look here. It says, we strongly advise change your password. Not we strongly advise you to change your password. We strongly advise change your password. Well, there's an example of grammar and spelling that's not correct. And finally, if we were to hover our mouse over this pointer, and I can't do that because this is just a picture, but if we were, you would see that the link was pointing to some website that is definitely not eBay. Okay, one final example. Now this one, again, appears to come from Barclays Bank in the UK. But if you look at the email address, there's one here that does appear to be from Barclays, but another one beside it that isn't. And that alone is enough to set off alarm bells. But then if we go down here and we hover over Restore, it shows us that the link is someplace in Korea. Again, an indicator that this is not a legitimate email. And so in summary, we believe that education leads vigilance. The more you know about how cyber scams work, the less likely you are to fall for them. And that's why it's essential to provide ongoing cybersecurity awareness training to your staff. Because as we often say, some people will click on anything. And that doesn't mean that they're malicious. Most of the time it just means they haven't been well enough educated. Well, that brings us to the second piece of the puzzle, the second pillar, and that is prevention. Despite all of your best efforts, someone will click on the wrong thing. How do you keep that from infecting all your computers, bringing your network to its knees, and causing you tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost productivity and lost business? Well, I'm happy to say that the first line of defense is free. First and foremost, your passwords are the point of entry to everything in your digital life. Whether it's your corporate network, your Amazon account, or your bank, those passwords are all that stands between your security and those hackers. So here are the key tips for keeping yourself safe. Number one, change your passwords regularly. If possible, set the policy to force password changes. Don't use simple password changes, ABC123, your child's name, your dog's name, all of those are bad passwords, easy to guess. I want to place particular emphasis on point number 3. Don't use the same password for everything. If you do that, you are opening the door to a major attack. If you use the same password for your email that you use for your bank accounts, then anybody who harvests your email address and password now has the ability to log into your bank account. Don't let that happen. Don't use the same password twice. When it says your password is expired, don't re-enter the old password. Change it. And I know it's difficult to remember multiple passwords, but the good news is that there are plenty of free password managers like LastPass that make it much easier. Use those. Definitely don't put your passwords in an obvious place, like on a Post-it note stuck to your monitor. We were at a cybersecurity conference a couple of weeks ago, and they showed an example of a guy who got hacked because on his social media page there was a picture of him sitting next to his monitor, and what was pasted to his monitor? All of his passwords. So he just broadcast that over social media. Don't enter passwords on a public Wi-Fi network. If you're sitting at Starbucks and you have to log into your bank, turn off Wi-Fi, use the data on your phone. It's much more secure. And finally, consider using two-factor authentication. It is more painful, but it is important. And I'll just pause for a second and mention that we had a request to post the link, which we will do shortly. So let's move on to defense number 2. Now, defense number 2, unfortunately, is not free, but it is something that every business should have, and that's cloud backup. No matter what disaster strikes your business, having an effective, accessible, automated, off-site backup strategy can make the difference between business disaster and business survival. As I may have mentioned, over the past 18 months, we've seen 3 clients attacked by ransomware. In every one of those cases, we were able to recover their data and get them working again within a couple of hours, all without paying a penny in ransom. And for maximum security and recovery speed, we would recommend not just backup, but a business continuity solution like the ones offered by Datto. Now, of course, no one wants to have to go through the experience of restoring their data, which brings us to defense number 3. There's a big difference in effectiveness between commercial antivirus software and the free stuff. And if you don't believe me, just go online and Google the surveys. What's even more ironic is that high-quality, business-grade antivirus software is not expensive. And that's why we don't get it when we see companies cheap out and go with the free stuff. An effective antivirus program will not only protect your computer from virus attacks, it will prevent you from going to websites, even unintentionally, that could launch that kind of attack. One of the products which does that very well is WebRoot, which we include on every computer that we manage. It's extremely lightweight and very effective. But without a doubt, the Rolls-Royce of antivirus solutions is SentinelOne, a next-generation product used by some of the largest corporations in the world. SentinelOne can not only defend you against attacks, it can even reverse a ransomware attack. In fact, they're so confident of this that they offer a $1 million US ransomware guarantee. Number 4. It never ceases to amaze me how many times we'll go into a customer site with 50 or more computers only to discover that they're using the modem supplied by Rogers or Bell as their gateway to the outside world. Or maybe they're using a consumer-grade Wi-Fi router that they bought at a big box store for $79. Well, that's like putting a luggage lock on your safe. Anyone with a screwdriver could break it off in 5 seconds. A consumer-grade router provides minimal to no protection from a determined hacker. And even more important, it won't block malicious websites, infected emails, or many other kinds of invasive attacks. Only a real firewall will do that. And like antivirus software, the good news is that an effective firewall is not expensive anymore. Most businesses can buy a good one for well under $1,000 and pay monthly costs for around $50. Don't you wish your insurance premiums were that low? Of course, the ideal situation would be never having to worry about phishing attacks because they can't get through your defenses. That's why you need an effective mail filtering solution. Unfortunately, while Microsoft Office 365 and Google G Suite provide some basic spam protection, they do at best a mediocre job of filtering out junk. And unfortunately, even if only one bad email gets through, that could be disastrous. By implementing an email filtering solution like Mail Protector, you significantly decrease the risk of being hit with a phishing attack. Mail Protector not only filters incoming mail, it also filters outgoing mail, and that will prevent your computers from being used by an infection to send out even more malware ruining your reputation and getting you blacklisted. Of course, no filtering solution is perfect, but any filtering solution is better than none at all. And that brings us to the third pillar of cybersecurity, remediation. Unfortunately, even with the very best defenses, sometimes an infection will still get in. What then? How do you minimize the damage to your equipment, your data, and most important, your reputation? Well, the first and most obvious answer is that you need to change your passwords. But here's the chicken and egg question. How do you know if someone has your passwords? If you wait for the bank to call you to confirm a transfer of $30,000 out of your account, or for your clients to ask if the email that they all just received from you is legitimate, it's already too late. And that brings us to the second step, which is to know your exposure. Obviously, the more you know about any possible breaches, the better your defenses will be. And that's why we offer a technology that will alert you as soon as your credentials have been compromised. It's called Dark Web ID, and what it does is to monitor millions of sites across the dark web where stolen information is traded, looking for evidence of compromised credentials. Now, that sounds very vague, so let me do something to make it real. Let's look at a real example. I picked an email domain at random. In this particular case, it was Environment Canada, and I picked it because, like most Canadians, I'm obsessed about the weather. So here's what happened when I ran a search on Environment Canada. Guess what? The dark web search turned up 2,986 sets of compromised credentials. What you're seeing here is just part of the first page. And if you'll look carefully, you'll see that the most recent breach occurred on October 7th, just over a week ago. And we're still on September 14th, just a few weeks ago, someone managed to harvest 8 different user passwords. Now, why is this bad? Well, that was just a single one-time search. That information could easily change daily. And think about this. If a hacker got those passwords, he could not only read users' email, which may or may not yield anything useful, but it could have things like personal banking details, credit card numbers, who knows. The hacker could potentially use that login to log into their systems and wreak havoc, or use their legitimate credentials, which maybe they use to log into their bank as well, to commit fraud. And that's because, as I mentioned earlier, many people have a tendency to use the same password for everything. Now here's a final thought. What are the odds that Environment Canada even knows that it's been breached? And that's why we think every business needs ongoing dark web monitoring, not just a one-time search. With ongoing monitoring, you get an immediate alert whenever your credentials are breached. This gives you the opportunity to change your passwords and run security scans before there are any serious consequences, before someone uses your information to empty your bank accounts or to try and scam your customers. Now, dark web monitoring is based on email addresses, and the reason for that is simple. It's because the overwhelming majority of accounts, your bank, Amazon, Yahoo, whatever, use your email address as the login credentials. Well, on to remediation step number 3. Consider cyber liability insurance, and no, it's not cheap. But if you're holding thousands of customer records, and those records contain confidential information like credit card numbers, birth dates, social insurance numbers, and so forth, you could be liable for huge fines and massive lawsuits if you're breached. One of the things that came out at this conference we were at a couple of weeks ago is that the estimated value of a single stolen digital record is $233. So do some basic math. How much would that be valued at if you lost 1,000 customer records? Well, fortunately, cyber insurance can help you survive that kind of an experience. And finally, if you do experience a breach, The last thing you need or want is a repeat of that experience a few weeks or months later. Get your IT provider to perform a full scan on every computer on your network, as well as a network health check. Ideally, they should also run a penetration test from the outside. Well, that covers today's agenda. But before we finish up and move to questions, I have 4 really great offers that we're combining with today's talk. So here goes. Offer number 1, this one's completely free. We will happily scan 2 domains or email addresses for you, no charge, and send you the reports of what we find on the dark web by secure encrypted email. Just send the request to info@connectability.com. Offer number 2. If you think your business would be safer with any of the tools that I've talked about today, and we certainly think it would, we're offering 10% off our regular pricing this week only. At noon on Monday, October 22nd, it goes back to regular price. We also managed to convince Datto to give us special pricing for this event. So if you purchase a Datto business continuity appliance from us by Monday morning, we can give you an additional 15% discount on that purchase. And finally, offer number 4, to really protect your business, we think what you need is a managed security solution. So we're offering a 15% reduction on both of our managed security plans for the first year of service. Again, that's this week only. So just to recap, here are the products that we've talked about. Datto Business Continuity Backup Appliances, Sentinel-1 Antivirus, Mail Protector Email Filtering, Sophos XG Next Generation Firewalls, ID Agent Dark Web Monitoring, and our total managed security plans. Now, what do you get when you sign up for one of these? You get the peace of mind of knowing that you're doing everything in your power to protect your online digital presence, that you're doing everything in your power to dramatically reduce the number of risks that could potentially attack your network, and you're protecting your identity and your online health and the health of your business. So with that, I will say that if you're ready to move ahead, please email Kate. Her email address is here, or give us a call, or just post your request in the chat, and we'll get the ball rolling right away.